On Tuesday, I said that TCU had lost some players to the transfer portal, but for the most part, they were just depth pieces. But shortly after I finished recording on Tuesday, that news changed. We'll talk about some new players that are in the portal next on Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Stephen Simcox. You can subscribe on our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe wherever it is you get your podcast if you like to digest it in its audio form. So Tuesday, I spent some time talking about players that are in the transfer portal. And for the most part, it was guys that weren't seeing playing time and had kind of fallen to the bottom of the depth chart and were looking to go somewhere else. And with the exception of Blair Conwright, I really wasn't super concerned about anybody that was moving on. But I spent part of that episode talking about one of the reasons I wasn't concerned about Blair Conwright moving on was because of a guy like Jordan Hudson. Young player, showed some flashes last year, the true freshman at that outside receiver position. Today, Jordan Hudson put his name in the portal. And there's a lot of different kind of layers to this. The Athletic, they rank transfer players. He's the number 2 ranked transfer in the country, and that's availability. And Hudson is from Garland. He was the highest rated player, I believe, in that 2022 class from last season. His stats weren't like eye-popping last year, 14 catches for 174 yards and 3 touchdowns, but got some opportunities, especially late in the season, played a lot of snaps in that playoff game against Michigan. I remember him having 1 catch for sure, had a big block on that Quentin Johnson touchdown that sealed it in some ways, and was just an effective player for them down the stretch. Did have 3 touchdowns, found his way in the end zone a few times. And he was originally an SMU commit, or I think he was an Oklahoma commit, then he committed to SMU, and then he moved on to TCU. And one thing to watch here in this journey with him in the transfer portal is Rashad Samples was a huge part of him coming to SMU. I know that Brian Carrington and Rashad Samples had something to do with him coming over to TCU, and now those 2 guys are on staff at Arizona State. And they've obviously are dynamic recruiters, did a great job bringing in talent at TCU. Well, I say that especially Carrington, not to discredit Sam, but he just left before the season even started because he got an NFL opportunity. But he did bring a lot of pieces from that 2022 recruiting class. And I think multiple things can be true here at the same time. So I'll give you this background as well. Jeremy Clark said on Wednesday, when this news came down on Twitter, he said, was kind of surprised by the lack of production Hudson had this spring, predicted he would have a big spring, and was probably the 4th or 5th best wide receiver on the team by the end of camp. And so that's significant news to know. Now, Hudson briefly was in the transfer portal in the last window, ends up deciding to come back, goes through spring camp, was not super impressive, according to Jeremy Clark from Horned Frog Blitz. Was kind of down as the 4th or 5th best receiver on the roster. Obviously, guys like John Paul Richardson and JoJo Earl had really productive springs. But that being said, there is opportunity at that outside receiver spot. Savion Williams is there. And one player I didn't mention yesterday, and somebody commented on YouTube, it was Brian Capers. He said, what about that transfer receiver from UCF, as he was a really good one over there? And he's talking about Jalen Robinson, and that's a good name to know, and he did transfer in. The thing about Jalen is it's really all about his health. He was at UCF, had a huge season, almost 1,000 yards receiving. Then he was at Auburn last year, and now he's transferred to TCU. Didn't do much at Auburn this time there, but, was on the roster. And so He transferred now, and he is at TCU, and he will be a factor in the outside receiver position. Like, I expect him to be someone that could be effective for them. I'm sorry, it was Ole Miss. It wasn't Auburn. I got my SEC schools mixed up there. But he was at UCF, went to Ole Miss, and now he's at TCU. Didn't do much of anything at Ole Miss last season. So I think the biggest question with him will be availability. But back to Jordan Hudson. He's in the portal. Okay. Multiple things can be true at the same time. From a production standpoint, it's not going to take a lot to replace what he did last year, which was not a lot because he was a true freshman and he played sparingly. He did not have a good spring camp, according to people that were there. Didn't appear like he was the best receiver on the roster. At the same time, super talented player, someone who I think had a lot of potential and could go somewhere and tear it up. So in my mind, this is still a pretty significant loss. Now, TCU can go get somebody to take that scholarship and take that place. And outside receiver might be a bigger need now in the portal than it was before this happened. And they can certainly, try to work around this. But still, I think this is a big deal. And it's not an indictment on the coaching staff. It's not – I don't think the sky's falling. I'm not saying let's, run for the hills here. I saw a lot of people just dismissing this today. And I get it. And I think TCU's going to be all right. I think they're going to move on fine. But I do feel like this is a big loss. Even with the struggles they had in spring camp, even if he didn't come in totally mentally focused. And at the end of the day, if that's the case, it's probably better for both parties that he moves on. But regardless of circumstances, this was a player that seemed to be the next guy up at this position, and now he's going to go elsewhere. So something to watch. We'll monitor it. We'll see where he lands. But Jordan Hudson has hit the portal. There were a few other players that also hit the portal that, maybe not big factors on the depth chart right now. However, kind of like Hudson, not to his extent, but I think could have done cool things in the future. And we'll talk about that next. Before we do that, though, I mentioned FanDuel frequently. FanDuel is the best place to go if you're trying to get in on wagering sports, right? Like if you want to dip your toe in that world, understand how to make some money, you should give FanDuel a try. They have an app that's safe, secure, easy to use. Download that today. You can also go to their website, FanDuel.com/lockedon. If you do that, they got a special deal. No sweat first bet, up to $1,000 in bonus bets if you put as little as $5 down. NBA playoffs in full swing. There's games every night with these series going on. MLB going on right now, too. The Rangers look good. I'm excited about that. It's been a nice mental break from the frustrating Jekyll and Hyde team that is TCU baseball, unfortunately. FanDuel, best place to bet, best place to go if you're trying to understand how to make some money. Again, you can do it on their app or FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, it's where the game starts, official betting partner of the NBA. All right, so Jordan Hudson moving on, right? And there were a few other players that also submitted their paperwork and into the portal on Tuesday. And so let's run that down. Another player that will be seeking a new home is Kyron Chambers, redshirt freshman entering the portal. And Chambers was another player that came over after the coaching staff changeover. Was originally a Arizona commit. Wasn't the highest rated player out of high school, 3-star player. But there was excitement about him. It was a big deal when the staff was able to flip him. And it seemed like, a good fit for everybody involved. Really fast from South Oak Cliff High School, won a state championship there. 6 foot tall, 195 pounds. Again, didn't see the field a whole lot. And this is one of the interesting things about college football now in 2023. You have a guy like Kyron Chambers, and he is – an exciting player. You want him to be part of your future. But you also have to address what's going on in the here and now. And so you look in the portal and you go get a guy like Avery Helm, a dude that started in the SEC, was, battling at the best level of football in the country. He wants to come to TCU. You bring him over because, he can start at corner right now. And then they go get some other guys like Shannon Kanda and Mason White, and you already have a player like Josh Newton who's played a lot of snaps on a team that went to the national championship game. And suddenly Chambers is buried on the depth chart, and he looks up and he's like, well, I guess I'll go elsewhere. And it's I'm not blaming the players here, but I do think it's a byproduct of this new world of college football, and it's an unfortunate thing, is that you can't get super excited about, well, you can. It's harder to project, like, okay, you get a commit for a high school class, even if they sign, even if they come in early, even if it seems like they're going to be a big part of what you're going to do. They can easily just move on the next season if they're not exactly where they want to be. And it's the tricky balance coaches have to play of recruiting, players out of high school, recruiting players out of the portal, and then re-recruiting their own roster each year and trying to convince guys to stick around and be patient. And for whatever reason, Kyron's going to move on. Again, it's like, I think, you're not really replacing any production from last year's team. I think they're set at corner. I don't think this is a huge loss, but it's just one of those things is moving forward. You're losing a talented player, but you're not going to say no to the guys that you brought in because they can help you in the here and now more. So it's just that really tough tightrope that coaching staffs have to walk. But Kyron Chambers, the redshirt freshman from South Oak Cliff, he is going to be looking for a new home, and he'll be moving on in the portal. Landon Watson was originally came to TCU as a defensive end. Spent a few years there under Gary Patterson. New coaching staff comes in. He moved to linebacker. And again, it just seems like, a playing time thing, trying to find a new place where he can see the field. I feel for him. I mean, he transformed his body. He tried to make this position switch work, and it didn't click fully. I think he made some strides, but couldn't really get there totally. But Landon Watson is one of those dudes that he was really, it seems like he loved TCU. He's really passionate about going to school there and being on the football team, and was always like hustling to recruit for the Frogs and make sure that other prospects knew this was the place to be. So it's strange that he is moving on. But again, it's just one of those playing time things. I wish him the best. I wish all these guys the best. And it's not shocking, but again, it's just one of those like strange things about college football now is you have somebody who's clearly really happy at the university they're at, but in the name of trying to play more snaps, they're going elsewhere. And then finally, Noah Balatkov is also in the portal. And Jeremy Clark noted on Twitter that he had some position flex this year. He worked at left tackle, right guard, left guard, and he was working on the two deep. So, I mean, this is the guy that was in the mix to play this season, but guess he wants to explore some other options. So, in the event that he doesn't come back, I would imagine that they're going to be working the portal for interior offensive line. So, I mean, the good thing about this is you have some pretty clear goals now moving forward. Obviously, the D-line, you need to hit that hard. Now I think interior offensive line is a need. I feel like outside receiver might be a need. You might want to add one more of those with Jordan Hudson moving on. Sky's not falling. This is sort of the way of the world now, but you are losing some talented young players, and that's an unfortunate reality. When we come back, I don't want to talk about it, but we need to briefly discuss TCU baseball. I avoided it on Tuesday. Need to give you a brief update, so we'll do that next on Locked On Horned Frogs. All right, so TCU baseball, they'll be on the road this weekend playing West Virginia. They have lost 3 out of 4, dropped 2 of 3 to UNC Wilmington over the weekend in non-conference series, and then had an ugly loss tonight to Lamar, 9-6. Got down 6-0 early in that game. Some errors, some misplayed balls led to some runs for Lamar. Braden Sloan only lasted a little over an inning, and bullpen couldn't fully pick him up. Did a nice job trying to stay in it, but eventually, things started to break on him. One positive from this game, Luke Savage threw an inning and looked really good, and it's his first appearance in a long time. He's been out with an injury, so if he can be back, that's significant. But again, just bad fundamental baseball, some gaffes on the base pass. Actually, that game ended because Curtis Byrne neglected to tag second base when he was trying to move up from second to third on a ball that was caught in foul territory, and also had another runner thrown out in third in the eighth when they were starting to rally a little bit. Just, man, some bad mistakes today. This team just seems really undisciplined. And maybe the biggest problem, Ryan Vanderhei got touched up Friday. Cam Brown got knocked around on Sunday. Cole Klecker's their one consistent starter right now, and I don't have an answer as to what to do. They've tried Chase Hoover a little bit on the weekend, and that hasn't worked so far. I don't know if once Luke Savage gets stretched out, coming back from this injury, he could be an option on Friday or Sunday. But, you're not winning many series if you just have one legitimate starter, and you're certainly not going to win a regional if that's the case. So they're still in the thick of it in the Big 12 championship race, but I saw Ray Cartwright, who is part of the Lupton Drinking Club podcast, and they follow TCU baseball really closely. I saw him say after this loss to Lamar, their hosting chances are pretty much out the window. I think you're starting to flirt with, being on the edge of tournament contention here if you keep dropping these midweek games and if things get ugly in conference play. But big series against West Virginia this weekend. We'll see if they can bounce back. I'd love that to be the case. Things do not look good, though, right now for Kirk Saarloos's club. That'll do it for Locked On Horned Frogs today. We'll be back in tomorrow. It's your team every day.